When you're ready to fill in the gap, you should have something like this. Take your extra piece of foam, lay it in, make sure it's the right size, and then cut it off at the right point. Next, to cover the gap piece and the crease that you've created here, you're going to want to take your roll of tape and again get a single piece that's long enough to cover the entire length of the blade. One thing you'll notice is that when I taped down the larger piece of foam, I didn't tape the gap at the same spot that I taped the gap on the smaller piece of foam. If you directly overlay the two gaps, it's going to make the weapon break down quicker. So you want to make sure to rotate the larger piece when you end up taping it to the smaller piece. We've got our blade mostly completed now. Should be safe if you feel it, not too hard hitting, and it should also not rotate too much on the core or rattle too much if you hit it around. Next, we're going to work on the base, making sure that it's safe as well. Next, we're going to start on the base to make sure that it's safe as well. Start off with your tube of closed cell foam, lay it up next to the weapon. Make sure that you've got that extra ½ inch of padding that you're accounting for with the foam. Cut it off slightly below, perhaps an inch over the core. And then, just as we did with the blade, take that, lay it over the core, see how much it overlaps so that we can tell how much we need to cut off. Once you see that it holds tight, we're ready to tape it. Now that we've got it cut down to size, we're going to do the same thing. Take a piece of tape, longer this time so that it can wrap all the way around. Tape it underneath the foam. Close the foam up, and then tape it all the way around. Once you get to the beginning, you can use this tape to close the gap. Once you've got your tape set, use another piece, tape around the bottom to help keep it secure. Now, just to make sure that we have sufficient padding, we're going to cut a larger piece of foam to surround the smaller one. Same thing, cut it off. Put it around. We're going to use a small piece to fill in the gap. Cut that to length. And be ready with your tape. Take a long piece of tape. Put it underneath the top layer. In this case, you're going to want to make sure that you have your gap piece of foam there ready to go. Tape all the way around the outside. Now, you're going to want to take another piece of tape and tape this part directly to the core to keep it secure. Now, this bottom part is not a striking surface in Devia. However, you do want to make sure to keep it covered with foam like this so that if you're attacking and you accidentally hit yourself or another player, it's safe. Let's make sure that it's secure. I'm going to take a longer piece of tape, tear it in half to make smaller strips, and go all the way over both sides. The other one, I'm going to do the same thing in an X shape. Next, we need to get the open cell tip for our blade. Start off with your large chunk of open cell foam. You're going to want to make sure in general that it's at least 2 inches thick. Hold it up to the top and make sure that you have enough foam. You're going to want to start off with a rough cut just to make sure that you have a square of about the right size. So I'm just going to cut this up. Use your scissors to try to cut one part of it at once. Don't try to cut all the way through the chunk of open cell foam or you're going to have a very unhappy hand and very unhappy scissors. Now that you've got your basic square shape, you're going to want to make sure that you have the right length. So we'll take our tape measure here, hold it up. This is 3-inch foam. I'm going to go ahead and cut some off the top. If your tip is too long, it won't collapse properly, and you'll find that it folds over instead of collapsing, which is what we're looking for. So now, our tip should be just over 2 inches, which it is. Looks about right. Now we're going to want to cut it to a more circular shape. This part is going to end up being covered by cloth. It's not a requirement to get it perfectly round. However, you're going to want to try to get it at least somewhat more rounded so that it doesn't look like a large chunk of foam on the end of a blade. Take your foam, You're going to want to make sure to have a garbage can underneath where you're cutting because you're going to get small pieces of foam everywhere. When you start cutting it down to size, start off by cutting the corners. And then just continue cutting smaller and smaller bits until you've got about the rounded shape you want. Make sure that you don't cut too far, you're going to need to start with a new piece of foam. To check, hold it up against your blade. This one's still too thick. Once your tip is cut to size and fits just about right, again, you don't have to be quite this round, you're going to want to be ready to tape it down. First, take a long piece of tape, and while holding the tip in place, go ahead and tape all the way around the base. About half the tape on the open cell foam, half the tape on the base of the weapon. Now, one thing you want to make sure when you're taping this at first, don't squeeze too hard. The foam may get compressed and the duct tape won't uncompress. Then, take a longer strip of duct tape, generally torn in half, so it's not too wide. Place it over the top. Gently tape it down over the sides. Then we're going to take one more piece like that, in a cross shape, over the top again. Hold it, squeezing it just enough to get the tape to stick without compressing the foam. Before you compress the foam, you're going to want to break the duct tape with holes. That's going to let the air get in and out wherever you might be closing little cells of foam with the tape. So that's easy enough to do. Just stab it with scissors, use something else, an ice pick works, a needle can work if it's large enough, leather awls work great. Now you should have a tip that compresses easily. It needs to compress at least halfway, and it needs to uncompress very quickly, usually within at least half a second. Now our tip is done. One of the last steps to having the weapon complete is to cover it with fabric. I like using tights. They're ready-made, they're quick to do. You can sew your own covers if you prefer. For using tights, hold one tip to the end, the other to the grip, and find out what length you need to cut them to. Cut them a little further down from that because you want to make sure that you have enough extra fabric to tape down to the base. Once your cloth is over the weapon, hold it at the base and use tape to firmly attach it to the weapon. You want to make sure that it's not pulled so tight that it's compressing the tip, but not so loose that it's going to be falling on and off the weapon as you fight. So you'll see here, it's about right. It's not so loose that I can pull it a long ways away from the weapon, but it's also not compressing the tip. The tip still compresses and decompresses freely. Now, with your pommel, this is a claw, so I'm going to use some green duct tape to finish holding it together. Use your tape to cover the tip completely, just to make sure that it stays secure. I'm going to put one piece over the top, and then another piece around the outside. And then a third piece at the very base, to make sure that it's covered all the way up. And there we have it, a Devia claw, ready for any PC beastskin or an NPC who uses claws. Enjoy your fighting.